Read out of our Science of Mind magazine. And I really like this title. It says, "What Next?" Each morning we are born again. Of yesterday nothing remains. What's left began today, and that's Anselm Holo in Corvus. Dr. Holmes says, "You are as young as your faith, as old as your fear, as young as your hope, as old as your despair. In the central place of every heart, there is a recording chamber, so long as it receives messages of beauty, cheer, and courage. So long as you are young," and that's in Help for Today. Our year is at the halfway point. Has the year been what you hoped it would be? Each new year, so many of us begin with lofty resolutions without being resolute in achieving them. For all kinds of reasons, including anxiety and trauma, we do not follow through. Let's get real for a moment. If we continue to engage in performing science of mind without addressing real-world traumas and suffering, we are no different from others who pontificate and posture while avoiding action. If we are able to change the world with that approach, it would have happened already. We have yet to reach the tipping point Dr. Holmes referred to when he said, "You find me 1,000 people in the world who knows what religious science is, and use it and live it as it is, and I'll myself live to see a new world, a new heaven, and a new earth here." And this is our invitation today. Forget about what we did not do yesterday, or what we could have or should have done in the past. The point of power and transformation is right here and right now. Are you willing to commit to knowing, practicing, and living this new thought liberation theology of relevant and applicable ways? Are we ready to actively heal our addictions, traumas, fears, anxieties, acts of violence, corruption, greed, and more, all of which stem from a consciousness of separation? And the affirmation is, "In each moment I choose to do what is mine to do. I put actions to my words, and I am a catalyst for lasting healing and evolution." And now we have a new speaker, and I am quite excited to hear her speak on a paradigm shift. So our speaker is Cheryl Cottreau. Welcome, Cheryl.
Okay, does it work? All right. Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm grateful to Reverend Val and Reverend Joanne for the invitation, and I hope that you enjoy my stories today. I was curious about how we all came to this thought, this philosophy. Was anyone here born into it? No, I wasn't. And I think we all have a story to tell of what brought us to this way of thinking and living our lives. I thought I would share my story. Just a minute, I don't want everything falling on the floor like that. Yeah, it belongs there. My talk today is called A Paradigm Shift from the Shadows to the Light. Most of my adult life I spent fighting depression. It started when I was about 17 in high school, and my boyfriend broke up with me and moved on to college, leaving me the last year on my own. I was always a good student. I excelled. I was accelerated. I took classes during the summer, but that last year devastated me. I lost my drive and my motivation. They didn't really understand depression back there. I knew something was really wrong. I remember the principal calling me into the office because I was skipping classes or sleeping in the classes that I did attend. And he said he didn't want to hold me back, so they passed me anyways. But I knew that I should have had another year. I married soon after high school, thinking that would motivate me to get out of bed in the morning. But no, that wasn't the answer. Work did. I enjoyed working, but yeah, then I started having babies. Lots of them. 4 children under the age of 5, and my marriage ended. Then there was the poverty. Single mom, 4 children, no skills, and no finances to pay for childcare, even if I could go to work. The shadows deepened with so much shame. I remember my oldest daughter at 10 having to get her brothers ready for school in the morning, making their lunches and getting them out of the door because their mother couldn't get out of bed. I sought help. I got meds. I started to function. But that dragon was still in the basement. I moved a lot. So did my children. I don't even think they remember all the schools they went to, and that really made it difficult for them to have lasting friendships that would support them in their life. When I first became a single mom, I belonged to a fundamentalist church that rained judgment on my head because I left my husband. The guilt and shame deepened, and unworthiness knit together a pattern of negativity that cloaked me. I stopped attending church, and I went through what I call my 40 years in the wilderness. I felt that I did not fit into any spiritual organization, but I still maintained a deep connection to what I perceived God to be, all-loving, all-powerful, and everywhere present, but so beyond my everyday experience. I had thoughts that if God was everywhere present, he had to be in me, and I had to be part of him, and not a separate entity. But I didn't know very many people who understood what I was thinking. I began meditating when I read a book by Shirley MacLaine called Out on a Limb. Oh my goodness, that book blew me open. Now, I'm not really prone to talking to aliens, but she did. But I was awakened to the idea that spirit was much bigger and more diverse than the small restrictive beliefs that I held. When sharing about my perceptions of spirituality with a friend, she told me that there was a place called the Center for Positive Living in downtown Calgary, and that I might find a home there. Oh my goodness, an organization that had the same thoughts that I did? It must be a cult. So it took me 3 months before I actually went. And even then, that first Sunday, I drove around the block 3 times before I went in the door. As soon as I heard Reverend Carol Carnes speak that day, I knew I had found my spiritual home. I didn't just show up on Sunday mornings. I signed up for workshops. I took courses, and I soaked it all up like a sponge. I learned about self-responsibility and affirmations. My meditation practice deepened. I learned that my life was 100% my creation. I am not a victim. It was not the fault of my parents. It was not the fault of my ex-husband, and it was not the fault of my external life that appeared to me. I learned that the more I fueled my darkness and negativity, more darkness and negativity showed up. If I didn't like what my life looked like, I had to think differently. Well, it's not easy to shift a lifetime of blame and negative thoughts. There was work to be done. I created an affirmation that was exactly opposite to how I felt my life was. I am happy with myself and life is good to me. In truth, I loathed myself. I was overweight. I failed as a parent. I was always looking for a man in my life, regardless of their addictions. I was so needy. I struggled financially. 3 jobs and still below the poverty line. I was exhausted all the time. No, I was not happy with myself and life sucked. But now, I believed it could be different. So over and over again, I stated that affirmation. Even in the midst of an emotional breakdown, I said, I'm happy with myself and life is good to me. I purchased Ernest Holmes' book, Signs of Mind. I read the whole thing, cover to cover. The language was daunting, but some of the ideas started to seep through. One story I remember clearly was that, financially speaking, you earn the amount of money you think you deserve. I was at the bottom of the pay scale, but I felt I was capable of so much more. One of my jobs was being a lunch lady, which meant that I went downtown, I purchased a bunch of sandwiches, and on a designated route, I sold sandwiches to ladies sitting behind computers. I had absolutely no idea how computers worked, but I felt that if I knew what I was doing, I could do this. I just didn't have the training. On December 4th, 1994, 1 month before my 40th birthday, I am sitting in this empty carpet store on a Friday night with no customers. This was my 3rd part-time job. And I was contemplating the next 40 years. And so to this silent, empty store, I said out loud, the next 40 years are going to be absolutely nothing like the last 40 years. I'm changing my life. I said it with power. I said it with intention. I knew everything was going to be different. Early January, my car broke down. And I thought, I can't do carpet measures, even if someone came in the store and asked me for one. So I went to my boss and I said, please lay me off. Because at that time, EI had training programs. And so if I was laid off, I could go to the government and get retrained in a skill. So I decided I'm going to take on computers and learn how to run one. So I convinced the government caseworker that that's what she should put me into. They taught me DOS, then Windows, and then a little Excel. A 6-week course, and I was somewhat fluent. I could turn on a computer, I could call up a program, and I could do some basic data entry. The following week was spent contacting every temp agency in Calgary. And in those days, we didn't email. We had to print off our resumes, write our cover letters, stick them in envelopes, and mail them out. I worked at that for that whole week, 8 hours a day. And then on phone calls, I would tell them how wonderful I was and how grateful they would be to have me. I had no idea how unqualified I was, but I knew my life was changing. I got my first job, and then the next. And then I got a job, a long-term position at an HVAC company, and I thrived for a while. My life changed. I took the teachings of Ernest Holmes to heart, and I manifested and manifested and manifested some more. I manifested muffins when donuts were expected. I manifested a moving truck when no trucks were available. That's a story in my book. I manifested a move to Nelson, a home to live in, and a job to support myself. And of course, I spoke about energy and manifesting and divine love and the universe to anyone who would listen, and to those who found it too awkward to escape. I was affectionately called the Bliss Bunny. In February, the following year, found me called back to Calgary in a car that was presenting distress. I coaxed it gently over the mountains with love and gratitude with my hand on the dashboard, only to have it die on the curb of my destination. Then I was able to obtain a contract position with account tabs in an oil and gas company with zero oil and gas experience. Black stuff comes out of the ground. What's a C3? When 3 recruiters, all dressed in very nice suits, and me sitting there in my slacks and sweater, asked me, "Why should we hire you?" And I smiled and looked at them and said, "Because I'll be the best employee you ever had." I think they hired me just out of curiosity to see how I was going to live up to that statement. And I thrived. So in 1999, I began my oil and gas career, and it ran to 2022, although I did have a contract last year for 4 months that just came out of nowhere, and I made more money than I ever dreamed of. And I believed that I was worth it. I was driving to work one morning from my house in a little town just outside of Calgary that I'd bought, and it was summer. And the canola fields were brilliant with yellow, and it was so beautiful. And the realization hit me. I am happy with myself, and life is really darn good. I had a dream, and I did the work, and I relied on Spirit every step of the way. Gratitude filled my heart. In 2013, I published a poetry book called Whisper of a Vision, and so much of it was inspired by my connection with Spirit. When I was driving home one night after a class at the center in Calgary, we were studying John 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word. And I thought about that. I was driving down McLeod Trail over where the graveyard was, and it just came to me, downloaded, and I had to get home and write it down. And I called it In the Beginning. In the beginning was mind, and mind thought, and thought created, And all things that ever were, past, present, future, were present in that moment. And creation knew mind as the universe, consciousness, the creator, God. God revealed itself as I am. I am the thought of God. I wrote essays about my life, my spiritual insights, and they sat on my computer for 20 years until last summer I was inspired to finally put it in a book called Myths, Mysteries, and Metaphors, which some of you have read. And that was the summer of surrender. That was the summer when a little voice in my head said, when I got lost on my way to a retreat center, hey, this is fun. Let's go on a road trip. Where? I don't want to go to Saskatchewan. No, let's go to BC. Let's wander BC. Let's go to Campbell River. Okay, why Campbell River? Well, you know, you've been thinking about that for about 5 years, right? Let's do it. And so I thought, okay, let's do it. It was an amazing summer. I found a place to live because I met someone in Ontario who said, oh, my mother lives in Campbell River, you can stay with her. Okay, I did. I stayed with that woman for 3 months. I looked after her cats. I did her gardening. I found a job at the Real Canadian Superstore, paid for the whole trip. And I came back and I went, that was fun. Let's do this again. I got a contract this winter that paid for a trip that I had planned to do that I had no idea how I was going to pay for. But all of a sudden, everything was taken care of. My life just started to unfold. Now, this point in my life, well, I'm homeless and my cars keep breaking down, and I'm just going, I live and breathe and have my being in the grace of God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. No idea why. Maybe someday I'll figure it out, but I'm moving forward, and I'm looking forward to my wandering trip this summer. And I'm stepping forth to manifest a new dream. I have a website. I have a Facebook page, Wandering Mystic 777. I'm writing, and I'm speaking. I am grateful. I am grateful. I am grateful. And so it is.